Hello, our guest today is Michael Visconti, one of the 4 candidates for the 2 available seats on the Milford School Committee in the April 5th town election. Welcome, Mike.
Welcome, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Al.
It seems very
Kevin.
deja vu-ish.
Deja vu. The first question we always ask every candidate is, why are you running?
I am running because, obviously, I feel I can be beneficial to the school committee as a member of the school committee. I have always felt and tried to contribute and volunteer my time to the town, whether it be on a committee or a board, town meeting, whatever it might be. And rather than sit back in my easy chair, if I had an easy chair, I don't have one, and criticize what's going on, I feel that I, along with anybody else, should not just sit back and criticize, or should not criticize at all. Rather, get out, try to do something to improve what you feel is not quite right. So that's why I feel that I feel that I will be able to contribute significantly as a committee member.
So you think it's better to, as opposed to sit on the sidelines and throw rocks, to be on the receiving side and catch the rocks, as long as they're not too big, right?
Small stones I can handle.
I don't know. I always say that democracy is not a spectator sport, so I congratulate you just for running. Because it's so easy for everybody to sit at home and go, oh, that board did this or this board, and it's much harder to actually put your name out there and run.
I think it's extremely important, and I would say this to anybody who stands for election, that's the hardest thing that you do in a community, is to stand for election, win, lose, or draw. That's very difficult to stand and say, okay, now everybody gets to take shots at me, and I'm gonna run for this office, and I hope you support me. That's a very difficult thing to do, very difficult.
Well,
so
I believe it is,
yeah.
to put yourself out there.
Absolutely.
To be the subject of
Whatever.
Criticism, ridicule, praise, whatever it might be.
And we know from personal experience, I mean, it's an awful feeling to lose when you put yourself out there, especially if it's, a big margin.
I would rather not lose.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But I have never been accused of being a quitter. And that's why I'm back here again.
Right.
Right.
Because I still truly believe that I can be helpful and contribute significantly to the town that I was born, raised, and grew up in.
What issues do you see that are causing you to run?
Well, as we all know, the school committee this past year or year and a half has been heavily criticized, rightly or wrongly, for taking somewhat of a lackluster approach to deciding which way they wanted, what direction they wanted to go in with respect to IT. As a result of that alleged lackluster approach, our Board of Selectmen basically had their hands tied with respect to what direction they wanted to go in. By that I mean, do we have one IT director that handles town and schools, or do we separate them? I believe it's important to keep those two separate. And ultimately that is what has happened. But the school committee was heavily criticized for a somewhat lackluster approach in deciding which direction they wanted to go in. Foot dragging, if you will.
Yeah.
I am an expediter, and I will, if I am elected, I believe I can help see to it that the school committee is never again criticized for foot dragging.
So basically, you just keep pushing the issue till it gets taken care of.
Some decisions made.
Let's not talk it to death. Let's get through the facts, and let's make a decision.
Information lockup is, some people want more and more. I just have one more question before I can make a decision. I just have one more question. And what happens is that causes it to drag on. Just, engineering overload.
Well, what I always say is at some point, there's a thing, I think it's called software creep, or
Yes.
feature creep, and in software where at some point, somebody along the line says, this is release 1, we're done. Now we're starting on 1.1 or 3.1 or whatever, but you declare it, closed and you move on. And you used to have an old expression at Digital Equipment Corporation, Mike, which is, don't try to boil the ocean. You can't. Focus on the problem you have. So I know another of the things you're interested in is you're looking at the data on how the school system is performing.
I did research that pretty heavily.
And what are your conclusions?
Well, they are not my conclusions. They are factual numbers that have been presented.
Okay.
For example, as we all know, has been recently publicized, Milford High has been ranked number 131 in the state,
So
which
that puts it about average.
on the surface, if you look at it, not bad.
Right.
131 out of almost 400 high schools, because they included not only public high schools, but charter schools throughout the state. However, if we run a comparative analysis with other surrounding high schools, for
Yep.
example, Medway, Holliston, Hopkinton, Upton, Franklin, all were ranked well into the 2-digit category, well below 100.
Now, would you make it, or want to make it, a sort of mission statement for the school, or a policy that you strive to be in between certain numbers at all times?
I want to get Milford High certainly down into the 2-digit level.
Right.
With rankings. Now, these rankings, by the way, were conducted by a nationally known company, a niche company, who are the foremost ranking organization that they rank schools all over the country. This was their methodology.
So it's third-party independent?
Third-party independent, no emotion. Their methodology for determining the rank is very complex. I started to go through it, but it was very complex, and after halfway through I said, well, I really don't need to know the entire methodology.
Right.
I can see that it is pretty complex and wide-ranging. Things like, facilities, grades, student-teacher ratios, which, by the way, Milford's student-teacher ratio of 14:1 is far below the national average.
I was going to say, that's an
Far below the national average.
incredibly favorable ratio.
What's the national average is like
25?
24, 25. I think.
24, 25 to 1, yeah.
Yeah, it's almost half.
And I'll make the comment that when I was in college, you had special seminars they called it an honors program, that had between only a limit of like maximum 15 students to a professor. So
Well,
I look at that as a very good average.
Interestingly enough, I've always had the people give me the argument that class size determined the quality of education, which
I don't buy that.
I've never said that. I've never agreed that that's quality of education is relative to class size, and you've just given me some numbers that kind of prove that.
And I don't buy that either, that class size determines quality of education. But you'll hear all over town that, there are too many students in the classrooms. Well, the numbers don't lie. The numbers tell the story. You can make categorical statements till the cows come home. But if you look at the stats and you review the numbers, those categorical statements you'll find will be unfounded.
That's interesting. That's an interesting piece of information.
Well, I once worked for an Israeli gentleman who used to say, you cannot manage what you cannot measure. So he wanted everything measured, and he said, when you have the measurements, then you can manage things.
Right. Now, how did Milford do on the test scores, their test scores?
The test scores, each year, the College Board sets a benchmark score at which level they have determined that a student is ready for college or career opportunities not requiring a college degree. So it covers both.
Mm-hmm.
That benchmark, well, Milford fell far below that benchmark. Whereas our surrounding schools, Millis murdered the benchmark. Medway slayed the benchmark. Franklin stomped all over the benchmark. Now, there's a reason that the students in these districts are able to perform far better on the standardized testing than test scores than Milford is. And we need to find ways to turn out a better product, if you will. I believe we need to get back to the 3 R's, if you will: reading, writing, and arithmetic. Our old timers will recall that the 3 R's. Now, certainly, arithmetic or math has become far more complex than it was 100 years ago when I was in school. But still, it's basic knowledge that will help our students excel. If we make our students, if we teach our students to be proficient in reading, writing, and math, then they will be able to flow far more easily into career opportunities and college. Now, we can't just key on college, because a lot of our students will elect to just out of school take advantage of other career opportunities. We need to make sure they are prepared to excel in those career opportunities. If you can read, write, and add 2 and 2, I'm simplifying it
Well, for me, that's good.
if you can read, write, and add 2 and 2, then you'll be far better off. And of those 3, reading is probably the most important.
I think reading is a critical matter.
But those 3 together, there's a lot of competition out there, and you will beat the competition if you are more proficient in the 3 R's. As I said, you'll be able to flow into almost any career opportunity, including getting a job at a hotel. We need to find ways to enhance our basic teachings of reading, writing, and math. And if we do that, we will turn out a far more prepared student.
Okay. Mike, you've talked about the fact that people are choicing out of the Milford schools. What would you do to better find out why they are? I mean, the school committee interviewed a very small number of people who left there, mostly at the elementary level, came to no real conclusions. Would you survey every student that left and their family to find out why?
I have been, over the past couple of months, or 3 or 4 months, communicating with the gentleman who conducted the Choice Out survey for the Weston school system.
Okay.
Now, this was not prepared and administered by the school people.
They hired a third-party
This was an
company.
outside survey company that did this. Now, the survey was, one of the issues with the Milford survey, or questionnaire, if you will, is number one, it did not make it to a large number of the people that choiced out. So any results that came back and any statistical information from those results is, I don't want to say worthless, because any information is somewhat valuable, but it is incomplete. And I believe we need to, the Weston survey was 7, 8 pages long.
Yep.
Now, while that might seem somewhat intimidating, if you said, oh, I have to fill out a 7-page survey, on average, 10, maybe 15 minutes to fill out the survey. It was available online and also hard copied to the Choice Out. Now, see, Weston did this.
I'm sorry, but the parents of, let's say my child choiced out, I would get this in the mail?
You would either get it in the mail, or I
asked to go to a
believe the way
website
he had
and
it
fill it
set
out.
up was, if you didn't want it online, you could opt to receive a hard
Okay.
copy.
And then I mail it back, and this company processes the data and then gives the school a
The data
report.
would not be processed by school personnel.
No, it's by the
So-
third-party
So it
company.
would be completely
Okay.
objective. And by being completely objective, I believe, far more valuable in helping Weston, if you will, because Weston
Yeah.
had this same problem.
I'm just be curious, why would people leave Weston?
You know, the title of the survey, coincidentally, was why not Weston? I don't know, Weston, okay, in the rank, yeah, we just talked about Milford's ranking of 130,
Yeah.
high school being 131.
Yeah.
Weston, number 6 in the state.
Yeah, see, Weston has the highest property tax rate continuously of any community in the state. And I would just take out of that they must have a high-ranking school system as a correlation.
Well,
So
I'm not so
sixth.
sure if that's a valid correlation, but
I would think it is, because that means they tend to spend more on schools.
But this, and my contention is that more money on schools doesn't necessarily improve the quality of the schools.
But there's a much higher income level population living there and those populations, in my opinion.
They drive it.
Tend to value education and push it in the home.
And they drive it, it's driven totally different by,
And,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, if there's a history that the mother and father went to college, choices are the kids will go to college. Chances are, in my opinion. I don't have
I
data.
believe that's true.
I don't have the data to back it up. It's just a gut feeling from knowing parents where I live. If the parents have had a college education, or one of them, they tend to want their kids to go to college.
Yes.
You know, and then then they start analyzing the costs and have a heart attack, but that's a whole other issue.
Yeah, I've had one of those too.
Well, I know from myself,
Yeah.
I know when my son was in school, I had no doubt he's going to college. Now, if he did not go, well, that would have been okay too, but he did go. And I felt that, as you probably just alluded to, it was the natural progression of things, that if the parents went to
Yeah.
college, then the children go to college. Not everybody is cut out for college.
That I agree with as
That is
well.
why we need to make sure that we give our students the best education we can in high school. Because a good percentage of those students will go out of high school right into career
Well,
opportunities.
I'm going to put a caveat in your last statement. Since you're talking about a public high school, it's the best education for the amount of money the town can afford. Because not every town can afford to give 70–80% of its budget to a school system. I think the running average is between 50 and 60%.
Yes.
So some people tend to forget that, you're dealing with a public school system. There's a finite amount of money every year that's appropriated to the schools. So it's
There is.
not meant as a negative, but sometimes, not necessarily in Milford, but in surrounding towns, people forget you're dealing with a publicly funded entity, not,
I believe
private one.
we spend round numbers, around $12,000 per student, I
Yeah.
believe, somewhere in that range.
That's
which
not
is-
bad.
Which is not far off from
right.
the other surrounding towns,
Then you should be getting,
who seem to be able to turn out a far better product, if you will.
what do you think the difference is? Do you think it's the
I-
way
I-
they
I
approach
don't know.
education?
I don't know. I don't know what the difference is, but I believe Milford has all the tools and all the equipment to turn out a quality student. And you'll hear people say, well, I don't know, certain percentage of graduating seniors went on to higher education.
Right.
That can be misleading. That can be very
To me,
misleading.
it's how many graduated from the higher education.
That's the stat that everybody talks about. We had 98% or 96% of our kids graduates go on to college. But you never hear how many of those graduated with a degree from college, which I believe is a significantly different number than.
And they don't also tell you how many went to two-year junior college, how many went to four-year college, and they don't track, well, they can't track beyond that. But beside that, what's wrong if only 50% went on to college, if the other 50% wanted to go in the military or be auto mechanics?
Nothing wrong with that,
Absolutely nothing wrong with it.
as long as they can read, write,
Right.
and add.
Correct.
We don't have enough of those kind of people in the stream right now. We're short carpenters. There aren't enough good carpenters. There aren't enough
Well,
good plumbers. There aren't-
there's a reason for that, and that's the region's Voc Tech school has become a college prep school, not a Voc Tech school. It's not enough, they don't turn out carpenters, they turn out people who study construction and go to college.
speaking of vocational skills, okay, we need to keep in mind that the primary reason for going to school, Milford High School or another high school, is for academics. It is not for vocational skills. We need to leave the vocational courses to the vocational schools. Not to be redundant, but if we teach our students to read, write, and add, they can more easily flow into any career opportunity, including carpenter. You need to be able to add to be a carpenter.
Yes,
In
you
addition
do.
to your physical skills, you need to be able to add, use a ruler, calculate areas, volumes, that type of thing. That's all required, or you're going to fail. If we teach our students to be proficient in reading, writing, I'm being repetitive, but if we teach our students to be proficient in reading, writing, and math, as I said, they will be more likely to succeed because there's a lot of competition out there.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be more likely to succeed in non-college degree required career opportunities, including getting a job at a hotel. Leave the voc classes to the vocational schools. Concentrate on improving academics.
But wasn't the idea underlying setting up the hospitality training in the Milford school system, that it wasn't being offered at the Voc school, and it would keep kids in school who might otherwise drop out?
I would suspect that that was the logic. I would say that that's the logic, and the other thing that gave them the ability to do that is because that particular vocation is not offered at any other vocational schools.
Right, and it also offered a high school.
And there's a reason.
But it also.
Think of the underlying reason for that not being offered at other vocational schools. It might be that you don't need that kind of training to move into those types of careers.
Not at the entry level, but certainly in management you do. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't have colleges offering, ranging from Johnston, Wales to Cornell, offering, full-blown degrees in hotel management,
Right.
and things like that.
Right.
But I agree with you. I mean, having recently stayed at a hotel, it doesn't really take a lot of skill to process the reservations. It takes a lot of people skill.
How many additional math courses could we add if we did not have to apportion some of the money to the hospitality courses?
I don't know. I don't know enough
Well,
about
I don't have the
I don't
answer
know
either,
enough about
but-
the course program. The last time I was offered a choice of courses was in college, where you have a dizzying array of things, where you have to take some are required, some aren't. In high school, I seem to remember, with the exception of picking a foreign language, the classes were assigned to you. I mean, I didn't get to pick a math class. It was given to me.
You picked, well, it was Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Algebra 3 or 4, and then you had...
No, if you weren't, in my high school, if you were like me, didn't have a good head for math, and you didn't do well in freshman year math, you went on a different track. You went this way, the other kids went that way up to calculus, and you went sideways and had more algebra than anybody else.
I kind of went like this.
So,
To Al's point, we cannot keep offering free ice cream cones just to keep kids in school.
okay,
You're here to learn. This, by the way, goes back to somewhat where the parents come into play.
which I agree is a huge portion. I really believe that. I can only speak to my own atmosphere growing up, but I had two parents who grew up in the Depression, and I tell people this all the time. In the 1930s, everybody in New York City took a test, graduating high school, and it was called the Regents exam, and people who scored above a certain level got to go to City College of New York for free. And my mother couldn't go because she couldn't afford the books. So I grew up in education. It was a high value placed on not missing out on education like she did. She became an Army nurse and got a nursing degree that way. But there was a very high degree in my family in education, and I think it paid off very well for me and my sisters. I similarly see that with people. If the parents push education at home, the kids tend to do a little better.
Yeah. There is no better gauge of education than standardized testing. No better gauge, because now you're on an equal level with everybody else.
Okay, so
You
speaking.
know and I know.
Yep.
Whether we want to admit it or not.
Well,
Different teachers grade differently, different schools grade differently. To me, standardized testing is the
Okay,
the standardized
End all.
testing, no, but standardized testing has one weak spot, and it is significant, and it's called if you can't read.
well, it's also you educate for the test.
So if you can't read, you're not going to do well on any kind of test, standardized testing. And that is the dilemma. So reading becomes even more significant. Believe me when I say reading is
All
a
right,
significant point.
Mike, do you favor the current MCAS tests or the movement towards the Common Core / PARC?
I've studied a little bit the Common Core,
Yeah,
and I think that the MCAS is probably, I will favor the MCAS after having learned a little bit about the Common Core.
okay,
I'm not an expert on it. I've
Nor
done a
am I.
little bit of research on it.
nor am I.
They get both, I mean,
By the way,
both-
you'll find more and more districts that signed up for the Common Core now,
Are staying MCAS,
Yeah.
yeah.
and
So-
and are now
I-
reneging on it.
Yeah, I think people don't understand where Common Core came from because it was devised by about the governors of about 40 states. Now it's sort of demonized in the presidential elections as big government intervention, but it was in fact the states that invented it, not the federal government. Anyway, we've got a couple of minutes left, Mike. Here's your turn to look at the voters and say, tell them, why should they elect you? It's free advertising for your campaign.
I would ask you to vote for me and elect me to the school committee because I am interested in not only the school department, school district, I'm interested in the entire town. I think I have shown that in my years of service to the town. I have been an active town meeting member for in excess of 35 years. And I stress the word active because I feel that you don't join or get appointed or get elected to a committee just to say that, well, I'm on a committee. If you're not an active member, then you might as well not be there at all. If you don't show up, you're no good at all. I have a perfect attendance record at town meeting for the last 35 plus years. I have not missed one town meeting. And when I was on the Zoning Board of Appeals for 20 years, I had also a perfect attendance record until I had a health issue that caused me to miss several meetings. Once that health issue was resolved enough so I could continue, I went on to continue with my perfect attendance record at the zoning board. I am a very objective thinker. I have no children in the system, which I believe will be very helpful. None of the votes that I cast while a member on the school committee will be with regard to how it may positively or negatively affect my child in the system, simply because I have no child in the system. I would ask you, please, cast one of your 2 votes for me for school committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. We appreciate you being here. Good luck on
Well,
April 5th.
thank you for having me.
Good luck.
Good luck.